Hello everyone, my name is Danny and you're watching my Friday Reads video for September 1st. Welcome back to everyone who has been here before and welcome to new viewers as well. I don't do these on a regular basis. I try to do it every week or every other week, but if you want to keep up with my next video, either reading or knitting or crocheting, you can just click on the little subscriber bell and it'll remind you when I have another video up. This is the point when I would normally say check out my Goodreads or my blog or what have you, but I want to do a little administrative note up here before we get to the books. I have started back taking classes, full-time classes, and they are more difficult than the classes I've taken previously, which means they are going to take up a good bit of my time. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to juggle doing all my studying as well as the other things that I like to do. So, you know, I'm only human, something has to give. So if you came here from my Facebook page or my blog, where I also post the links to the videos after I post them on YouTube. If you've come here from those places, I just want to let you know that for the next several weeks or so, there will be little to no written reviews on my blog, because I'm devoting all my time to studying to make sure that I do well in these classes. But I do still want to keep up with the Friday Reads videos if I do manage to do some recreational reading, which I do tend to do, because to help me get started in the morning, I tend to pick up whatever book I'm in the middle of for recreation and read that for about an hour to try to get me going in the morning. So I should have at least one book a week to report. So I will continue just to sum up, I'll continue to do the Friday Reads videos either every Friday or every other Friday and post those here, but I doubt that I will be writing reviews on the blog for a while. But I hope that you do continue to stick with me. Okay, let's get to the books. Now, the last Friday Reads video, I mentioned that I was reading a book by Mitch Albom, referring to my notes here, Mitch Albom, called The First Call from Heaven. I was reading this. This is not a little bit out of my comfort zone, as they say, but my BFF recommended that I read something by him. So I was trying to pick something that my library had available. So I picked that. I was, having a little trouble making myself read it. Well, lo and behold, my BFF watched my last video and she texted me and she said, you don't need to force yourself to read that book. Apparently it was I don't know if it was one of her least favorite, but as she said, it is detective-y, which you don't like, and touchy-feely, which I'd like to correct that misconception. I don't mind touchy-feely. After all, I do read romance, so there is a good bit of touchy-feely and sometimes just touchy-touchy in romance. But I also don't mind detective-y. I know I've said in the past that I don't read cozy mysteries, and I don't get into detective fiction the way I did when I was younger. But I don't mind there being sort of a mystery element to a story if there is, because I like there to be something for them to discover. But there are some people, a lot of people I know on BookTube and in real life, who say I read anything as long as there's no romance in it. Okay, one of my online pals on Facebook posted something saying, ugh, who put all this romance in my mystery novel? Well, I am the opposite. I'm like, where is the romance in my mystery novel? I will read paranormal, I'll read cozy mystery, I'll read a lot of other things if there is a bit of romance thrown in there as well. So it's not that I don't like detective books. I just want there to be some romance in there. For instance, an arc that I reviewed earlier this year, it was a Christian romance by Jen Turano. And Jen Turano is one of my favorite Christian romance authors. And because her books are light and funny, and there's always some sort of caper going on. Her Ladies of Distinctions series is all about these women who are like trying to get back their fortune that was stolen from them, or trying to figure out who their real family is, or some such thing. And usually there's a guy to help them figure it out and, you know, get them out of scrapes and stuff like that. So I like a story that has a puzzle to solve, you know, a little bit of a caper, but I like it to be funny too. And a lot of the ones that I pick up are not funny to me. But but she said, you know, no need to put yourself through reading that one on my account. And so she recommended One More Day, which I believe is a book about a man getting a chance to spend one more day with his mother, who actually had died a while before. And my library did not have that book. So another one she recommended was The Timekeeper. So I abandoned The First Call and I moved on to The Timekeeper, and I got it on audiobook because I thought, well, maybe I might be able to get through it better on audio. And also The Timekeeper was like the shortest book, the shortest Mitch Albom book they had at the library. I know that sounds awful, but I kind of, like I said in my last video, I kind of know what I like. Most readers do. They kind of know what they like and what they don't like. And a lot of times, if I read the blurb and I don't get the vibe I'm looking for from the blurb, I can already tell I'm not going to like it. And that's kind of how I feel about Mitch Albom books. But I said I was going to go ahead and read it. And I did. I listened to The Timekeeper on audio. And I believe it was like a 5-hour audio. So basically you could get it done in a day if you really wanted to. I was doing other stuff, so I didn't get it done in a day, but I got it done in a couple days. I liked the narrator. There was a British narrator. I liked the narrator. He was pretty good. The Timekeeper is a story of, it's basically like a fable, and it has that tone of like Aesop's fables, and it tells the story of the man who originally discovered time. You know, like from 6,000 years ago. The man who originally discovered clocks and how to figure out, you know, when day was going to turn to night and when night was going to turn again to day, and how long until the next full moon and that sort of stuff. And because he figured this out, humans started counting their time. You know, and started worrying about, I don't have enough time, or it's taking too much time, or what have you. People became consumed with time, and supposedly it was his fault, so he was punished. And and then after his punishment, he was sent to, his name was Dor. He was punished, and then he was sent to find 2 people to teach the true meaning of time to finish off his punishment, I guess. And he found this elderly man who's about to die, and this young overweight teenage girl who's not necessarily happy with her life. And I've had some distance from it because I finished it about a week or so ago, and it's one of those things I'm glad I can tick off my list and say that I read something out of my comfort zone, because I'm always, even though I love reading Christian historical fiction, you know, as my kids know to call it, the prairie romances. I've been reading those for years, and to the point where it's getting hard to find ones that I particularly like, and I'm having to branch out into different time periods. Because I don't read Civil War or before Civil War, and I don't read Regency. It has to be set in America. So I have specific, you know, like some readers say, my wheelhouse is very very small when it comes to that. But I read so many of them that I feel bad that I feel like I should read other stuff, but I enjoy them so much. But I do feel like I should read other stuff. So it's kind of like taking your vitamins. Every time I read a book that's not Christian historical fiction, I'm like, okay, I can check that off the list. I took my vitamin for this month. Give me back another Prairie Romance. So that filled that criteria for me, that, you know, I read something that wasn't a romance for a change. But there just wasn't enough happening in that book for me. I mean, you'd be surprised. You think, oh, romances, there's not a lot going on. But again, I do tend to read the romances that are not, they're not the romantic suspense necessarily. But there is something going on, you know. You got to save the person's fortune, or you've got to find their brother, or you've got to, you know, something. There's usually something going on. And I just felt like this book just felt like it dragged for me. And because it was a fable, a lot of the things that the author was telling me were really obvious. Like, you can't buy somebody's love, and, you know, you really should spend the few hours you have left with your loved ones, and, you know, those kind of things that are just, you know, maybe if I was younger, those would have felt more like revelations to me. But I'm 50, so they don't feel that way to me. But again, and overall, even though it ended better than I thought it was going to end, because I don't want to give it away, even though it ended better than I thought it was going to end, the book still did have an overall melancholy tone to it, just as the other book, The First Call from Heaven, had this melancholy tone to it that I just was not my thing. But after that, I went ahead and picked up, because like I said, I'm getting in this habit of just like grabbing my iPad from the side of the bed as soon as I wake up, and just kind of putting some words in my head to get me going, rather than rolling over and going back to sleep, trying to make myself get up. Kind of like my coffee before the coffee. And so the book I had in progress, this works better if I have a book that's already in progress before I lay down and go to sleep, because then I'm like, oh yeah, that book, what's happening in that book, let me grab that. So I had Whiskey Sour, which I've mentioned on here twice. Whiskey Sour by J.A. Conrath is detective fiction. It's the first book in the Jack Daniel's mysteries. All the books are named after cocktails. I think the next one I have on my iPad, which I doubt I'm going to read, is called Dirty Martini. But it's a female detective. Her name is Jacqueline. She goes by Jack. She lives in Chicago, and she's following, in this book, there's this serial killer called the Gingerbread Man that she's trying to catch. I picked this up because I thought my husband might want to read it. He went through a brief period where he thought he might want to read ebooks, but that didn't last. My husband's really not much of a reader. But also I picked it up because I thought it might be funny, and because the blurb suggested that it was funny. And like I said, I can't always tell by the blurb, but a lot of times, sometimes the blurb lets me down. And this was the case where the blurb let me down, because the book was not funny. I could see it was trying to be funny, but it wasn't funny. The main jokes were about how her partner, who is overweight, is shoving food in his mouth at every turn, which I didn't find that amusing. For instance, there's a character on the TV show Bones, which I watched all 12 seasons of. So it's not that I don't like detective stuff. I just apparently like it better on TV than I do in books. But there was a character on the last few seasons of Bones who was as skinny as a rail, and he was stuffing food in his mouth all the time. He was constantly hungry. And see, that was slightly more amusing, simply because of the contradiction. When you have the fat guy constantly stuffing food in his mouth, and you're making jokes about it, it feels more like, I don't want to use it just isn't funny. It just isn't funny. So but you know, it got better. It picked up better at the end as they were really on the chase of the serial killer, as they got closer to him and were tracking him down toward the end. So I don't know. It could be that the other books get better. I've heard that about other detective series where like the first book is and then the other books get better. I mean, somebody's reading them because there's like 10 books in the series. I counted 10 plus some short stories and stuff when I went on Goodreads. So somebody's publishing them, so somebody's reading them. So somebody likes them. It's just not my cup of tea, but I'm glad that I went ahead and read that because, like I said, it's been on my iPad since I think 2004. So it was time for it to go. And I'll probably delete the other one unread because I don't think that's my cup of tea. After that, I read Our Souls at Night, and I just finished this yesterday. Our Souls at Night by Kent Harif. I had heard this book mentioned before, but then when on the Book Riot podcast, which I listen to every week, but then after, and I think on their other podcast, Get Booked, they also mentioned this book. Apparently it's, you know, it was the author's last book. It was published posthumously, is my understanding. He was already ailing when he wrote the book, and it's a very short book. You can read it in about 2 hours. I think the audio is about 3 hours, but it starts off. I'm not going to say too much about it because it's a short book anyway, so I don't want to say too much about it. But it starts off on the very first page where this character, Addie Moore, who's 70 years old, goes to her male neighbor who's also 70 and says, hey, basically she says, hey, I'm lonely, you're lonely, our spouses have been dead for this many years, although she says it more eloquently than that, and I just need somebody to sleep with me at night. Not for sex, just it's lonely at night, and that's when it gets the worst. So would you just come over at night and lay in the bed next to me so we can both get through the night? And so it's just a very sweet, quiet, gentle. It's almost the antithesis of what I've said in other books, because I've complained even on this podcast with other books of there's not enough going on, that you're not doing anything. But with this book, I just appreciated the quiet of them talking to each other and them telling each other their life stories. And because they're telling each other their stories, it's not the narrator telling me she did this and then he did that and then she did this and then he did that. There's something about it being more of a dialogue that makes it easier for me to read and for me to get into it and feel like something's happening. Whereas with The Timekeeper, it was very much Dor did this and Dor did that, and while he did this, then this happened, and that just, I need dialogue. I need dialogue in my books. And there's a movie, I cut myself off earlier, there's a movie coming on Netflix at the end of September. I believe it's September 25th. And that's another reason why I decided to read it, because I felt like, okay, it's a short book. I can read it in a couple hours, and there's about to be a movie. That's usually a good combination for me, because I do like to read movies based on books. A lot of times I like to watch the movie and just don't bother with the book. Like, I watched Everything with my husband, and it's like, okay, that was done in 2 hours. I didn't take 2 evenings reading the book. So but I would recommend that, because it's a short, gentle read. And if you're an older person, I mean, I'm 20 years younger than the characters in the book, but I could still appreciate some of the things that they were saying about marriage and being lonely and that sort of thing. So that's everything that I finished reading this week. What I have upcoming. Now, I know on the last podcast I said, or excuse me, the last vlog, I said that I was going to read Up the Junction by Nell Dunn. However, a book that I've had on hold for a while called Beauty and the Mustache by Penny Reed just got dropped into my inbox because I get my books, I get mostly ebooks, I get them from the library, and I have them set for auto checkout. So they automatically check, once the book becomes available, it's my turn in the queue, they automatically check the book out to me, and I get an email notification saying the book's checked out. If you don't go get it in 3 days, we'll pass it to somebody else. So I definitely want to go ahead and read that. I've read 3 of Penny Reed's books already and really enjoyed them. This book is, I think the first, if I'm not mistaken, the first Penny Reed book I read was from her series, The Winston Brothers. It was the first book in her series, The Winston Brothers, called Truth or Beard. And then toward the end of that book, they started mentioning a sister and something about the sister, and that, you know, the ding 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 went off in my head that, okay, this is not the beginning of the series. This connects to something else that she's written. And if you know me as a reader, that drives me crazy. I don't like to read series out of order, even if they say that each book is a standalone. I just don't like to read them out of order. So knowing that there was another book, I'm like, okay, now I have to go back and read that. Which, I like her books, so it's a good thing. And this book is a combination because it is the 4th book in her Knitting in the City series, but it's also what they call number 0.5. So it's like the prequel that starts the Winston Brothers series, and it's the story of that sister that they mentioned at the end of book 1. It's the story of her and how she came to not be living in the town where they all live, because they live in like Kentucky or Tennessee, and she's like, I got to get out of this small town. And this is her story of how she moved somewhere else and met somebody. It's a romance, but it's funny. Penny Reed is always funny. So I would have read all of her books straight through, except A, my library doesn't have all of them, and B, I went through this thing of, oh, I shouldn't read all the books in the series in a row because people watching my videos are going to get bored with that. But, you know, I really enjoy her books and I miss them, and I want to go back to finish reading the rest of them. So that's what I'm going to do. So hopefully I will have this and maybe one other book to talk about next week, depending on how tough my studying is in the coming week. If you've stuck with me this far, thank you very much. I do my best to try to keep these under 30 minutes because I know it's tough to watch a long video. So thank you very much. As I said, I will put links to all the books that I have mentioned in the description, and I hope you click the like button and click the subscription bell so that you will be notified when I'm here again talking about books. Bye.